and I think everybody's going to like this one. We are going over conquering anger and frustration and how to master emotional control. So the objective today with this call is I want to equip all of you with the mindset, discipline, biblical wisdom necessary to master anger, frustration, turning them from destructive forces into tools for strength, leadership, and action. Oftentimes, there's always the question of why do men struggle with anger? Anger arises from a lack of control over circumstances, relationships, or personal struggles. Frustration can build when expectations don't meet reality, and instead of adjusting, oftentimes men will feel trapped. We got to remember that men of value are neither passive nor out of control, but we have to learn how to harness our anger into disciplined action. And right now, if we look across society, men today are told to open up, but we're also told, don't be aggressive. Men are told to lead, oftentimes without but with a lack of strong examples of leadership. That the word's thrown around to, lead the household, but if there is no strong example, then is it an unrealistic expectation? And for a handful of generations, men have grown up by seeing unrestrained emotion, fathers in rage, or complete emotional shutdown with apathy. But my answer to all these is, how do we actually master our emotions? And if we jump into biblical perspective on anger, God actually never condemns anger itself. He actually condemns uncontrolled, destructive anger. In Ephesians 4:26, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. It's kind of that old rule of, if you and your wife are fighting, don't go to bed angry at one another. And anger is not inherently sinful, but if left unchecked, it can consume you. It can consume a man, and it can poison your judgment and turn into bitterness. A fool is ruled by emotion, and a wise man rules over it. Proverbs 29:11. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. A weak man will lash out. A strong man will assess, calculate, and take decisive action. James 1:19. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of a man does not produce the righteousness of God. So when we think about this, are we reacting out of anger? And oftentimes, does it make things worse? Does the mark of a strong man, is it the ability to pause, think, and respond with wisdom? Righteousness in anger, can anger or aggressiveness serve a purpose? And the answer is yes. Because if we remember, Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple in John 2:13. He flipped tables, but his anger wasn't personal frustration. It was a righteous action in defense of God's house. They were essentially disrespecting the temple, and he had to let them know that that was not acceptable. So could anger be directed towards justice, protection, the truth, and not necessarily petty retaliation? I mean, we have men on this call who've served in the military. Is there a part where anger can be used in a beneficial way for the community when it's under control? And again, we want to remember that weak man will react, and yet a strong man will channel his energy. What's up, Tyler? Oh, we're going to go over that. We're going to go over how do we reprogram the mind so that it is under control versus an innate reaction, and that it's that channeled energy. Because we can use, all it is a form of energy, and we allow it to go in one direction, it turns left or it turns right. And if we haven't cultivated a mindset to have it turn right in a direction that is benefit for the community, for you, for your family, then it's just going to go wild and it's going to go off to left field. So we're going to get into that here in a minute. And if I haven't answered it by the end, make sure you bring that up, because that's what the point of this call. So like we were saying, anger is energy, and we want to use it and we don't want to waste it. Many great men in history use their frustration as fuel to drive them towards greatness. If something makes you angry, we have to ask ourselves why. Then find a constructive way to act on this. There's many reasons why something can make us angry. There's an insecurity, a touch point on insecurity, inadequacy, maybe something from our childhood, maybe a lack of respect. There's always going to be, once we peel back those layers, we can discover why something makes us angry, why this thing has control over our emotions. Because when someone is frustrated, it means that you have a lack of control. So one of the purposes of this call is to take control. And instead of like stewing in the bitterness, we have to assess the situation, make adjustments. Because if we are men of value, if we are men of Christ, we do not allow circumstances to dictate our emotions. If we don't have control over our emotions, it is easy for someone, some entity, to manipulate us however they see fit. So let's go on to resentment, because it's a poison. And we have to learn to let those things go, because holding on to anger only will weaken us. It allows the past to control our presence. By no means is forgiveness a weakness. It's refusing to be controlled by someone else's actions. Mike Tyson, of all people, the guy has some gold nuggets that he likes to drop. He says the mere fact of us holding anger or resentment towards someone else is the devil having control over us, because we don't have control over our own emotions. So letting go does not mean we are being passive men. It means we're focused on our own mission without carrying the dead weight. And then, Tyler, we're getting into your question, because we have to learn how to master the central nervous system, or calming the storm, because anger and frustration trigger a fight or flight response in the body. And if you don't regulate it, you essentially will be a slave of your own emotions, your own sociology. And there's a handful of things that we can do until it just becomes second nature, until it becomes just something that is instinct in us. There's breath control. When you're angry, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. The Navy SEALs literally use what's called box breathing. You inhale 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and repeat. When I'm out archery hunting and I'm hiking my ass up 1,000 feet of elevation to just go up to drop back down on a big buck or a big bull, just so the wind doesn't hit me. All of that has my heart rate going, knocking an arrow, getting ready to look through that sight to essentially take a life of another animal. I have to control my heart rate, control my cortisol levels, and any tension in the body. So I actually do this box breathing method right before I kill a buck. And if you guys see, I got my first archery buck right up there. Anyone who's watching visually. So if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs to do this, and I'm not tooting my horn by any means, but I do a very similar breath work right before I have to shoot something with an arrow and be precise that I hit it in the lungs and heart. There's something called buck fever, where your nervous system, the excitement, the adrenaline is going through, and your body is shaking. And there's a reason why I don't miss is because I'm able to keep my central nervous system completely calm. As I'm knocking that arrow, it's all fluid. It's not that I take a minute, take my eye off the prize, and do these box breathing. It's in the moment as I'm hiking back down, getting into range. I'm simultaneously doing the inhale, the hold, the exhale, the hold, and repeating this until I just feel smooth as butter. And then I'm going to put that sight on that animal and take its life. And these are things that we can be doing anytime we're in a position where flares are being launched. What are flares? Essentially, it's a call for help, right? When we got smoke in the air. And we can, whether it's our face gets red, we feel our fists clenching, every single one of us has a tail when we're about to lose control. Is there anyone on this call who wants to share what their tell is, that they're essentially losing control of their emotions and that initial feeling when their central nervous system is being dysregulated? Hey, DJ, I appreciate you sharing that. I definitely have, when I think back of high school, there was a handful of times where I got in fights at school. From my personality, I loved that challenge. I never did it intoxicated. But I could say from a performance standpoint, the ones where I went into it joking, playfully making fun of, versus the ones where I just wanted to curse and call him a motherfucker, how well I did was the joking, making fun. And then the one where I wanted to I just felt the rage and the wanting to call them the motherfucker is not quite the same performance, because it wasn't me being presenting strength under control. Or even when it came to early in my marriage with my wife, I would feel myself get hot. I'm starting to get warm, my body, my face almost going numb. And again, what a similar tell with DJ is me wanting to curse at her. But for me, the initial tell was I would just get warm, and it was just like, oh, this isn't good. In a great example that DJ brought up is allowing yourself to be in a calm state before you even respond. Like, how many of us do that? Or are we quick to respond? Are we quick to anger? Because then are we under control in our response, or is it being dictated off emotions? And emotions are good. There's lots of emotions. The excitement when I see my wife, the emotions that I get seeing my son win a wrestling match or even lose a wrestling match. You know, the emotions I get of hitting a PR in the gym. Lots of emotions are really good. So I don't want anyone to think when we're discussing emotions that all emotions are bad. It's just, do those emotions allow you to negatively impact yourself or your relationship or your decisions? Does that make sense to everybody? And I use this example a lot, especially with men. Everyone knows who Saul Alvarez is, or Terrence Crawford, the professional boxers, Canelo Alvarez, Terrence Crawford. Everyone knows who John Jones is. Everyone remember GSP, BJ Penn. How many of you guys actually saw them get into the ring full of rage? How many of us have actually seen those guys in the ring or in the cage, and they're so filled with this emotional rage that you're like, he's going to kill the other guy? No. They were very calm, level-headed, calm, cool, and collective. And the reason I bring this up is, if they're essentially going to war, hand-to-hand combat, at its almost as hand-to-hand combat as you can be. Are there rules? Yes, but we're not arguing semantics. The point is, another man is trying to inflict as much pain on the other man as possible in both of these collective sports. And yet none of them go into it with a rage or letting their emotions dictate their game plan. So why should our lives be any different interacting with our wife or children, the people who we claim to love the most? Now let that one sink in. If another man is intentionally trying to fucking kick you in the face as hard as he can in front of thousands and thousands of people, millions when it comes to television, and if they can do that, how do we cultivate the mindset and understanding that we should just be able to talk to our wife in the most calm state, regardless if her central nervous system is dysregulated? Because we are essentially supposed to be the man leading the household. We're supposed to be the rock, right? But if we go down, and I'm going to take it a little bit further, I'm getting off track here, but I want every man to think of at what level does that bring you if you are actually fighting with your wife. And trust me, I'm not trying to get sexist or anything here, and I love my wife, my mother, my sister so much. But you're essentially taking yourself, if all of us perceive us as a high value man, a man worth everything that God created us to be, and then we want to stoop down and get in an argument with someone who probably does not know how to control their own emotions and biologically is a more emotional person to begin with. Women biologically cannot handle as much stress as men. But we want to allow our stress to bring us to a level where we're both having irrational arguments. And then if we start doing that with our children, we just keep stooping down one step after another. Now, I'm not saying this for any of us to just flip a switch and we just change our life the next day. I just am putting this in the back of our minds so that we understand, it's like there's a reason biblically there's God and then there's us. We lean on God, and then our wife is below us and she leans on us. But if we're going to actually stoop down to the low or we're just getting in a screaming match, then that actually puts her on an equal platform. Just something to keep in the back of our mind as we're going through this. One of my favorite ways to calm the central nervous system is physical training. We know that physical training relieves stress and aggression in the body that is trapped inside. Lifting heavy weights, sprinting, carrying weight shifts your central nervous system from a fight or flight to a state of power and control. Even Nordic countries will use cold exposure, like ice baths, to force controlled stress adaptation. And there's no reason why we can't do any of these things. DJ, I don't know if I can put you on the spot, if you want to take that one step further as far as what weightlifting does to our central nervous system, the dopamine and oxytocin that it releases in our bodies, especially when we are under great amount of stress, doing not necessarily hypertrophy, but strength movements in the reps of 2 to 5, you could say. Yeah, we all have heard the term treason, right? Everyone knows essentially what treason means. But when you take it into the aspect of your family, I'm going to give you an example that DJ gave. You get angry, hit your wife. You're in prison. You committed treason amongst that family. Now someone else is raising your kids. You're somewhere where you shouldn't be. You allow your emotions to get a hold of you. That person pulls out a knife, maybe stabs you, maybe shoots you. You committed treason. Someone else is raising your children. You're having too many drinks because of something that happened emotional. You drive home, you kill someone, total accident. You're fucking going to jail. You committed treason. Someone else is raising your children. You have an affair. Your wife decides to fucking stab you in your sleep. Someone else is raising your kids. And this applies for the guys who don't even have kids. Just so you understand. I don't think there's a man on here who wants their children to be raised by another man, but it happens every day. And the correlation to all those examples is that person did not have control over his emotions and did not know how to regulate his central nervous system. Because how easy is it for the man who's calm, cool, and collective, who's completely comfortable in his skin, to not commit any of those things, who's whole as a person, has a relationship with God? I mean, it's just that one choice, decision, and you're committing treason against your family. Because we like to think of treason as you're giving fucking secrets to China. But when it's applied to your household, it becomes really quick. So continuing to work on just regulating the central nervous system, prayer and meditation. When we read the Bible, Jesus often withdrew himself and went to pray. And not because he was weak, but because he wanted to maintain clarity. So how many of us are taking a breather before we're going to interact with our wife through a negative situation? Are we actually just making sure we're calm, having prayer? And prayer is not just asking for things, but about aligning your emotions with wisdom. How can we meditate on scripture? Back to the cold exposure. Cold showers, ice bath, force your body to adapt to stress. Anyone do this? Do any cold exposure? Yeah, if we think we don't, nobody wants to do it. Like, nobody wants to just jump in there. There's a part of the suck that goes into it. I'm not telling anyone you're going to make more money by taking a cold shower. Not one penny more. But getting comfortable doing uncomfortable things, now that will benefit you your entire life. That is for sure. And so here's some questions that I have for anyone who's just open. How do we recognize our triggers? Who on this call who's open, like, what situations provoke anger? Like, what's that number one thing? And we ask ourselves, is it just a lack of control, lack of respect, feeling unheard, the unknown? I agree with everything DJ is saying, and I want to kind of explain why some of us can have DJ gave the example of the emotional scale, something that should be a 2, we're treating it as a 9. Since the beginning of time, men had to go to war, hunt, kill, fight, literally to survive. And then when you take men who have done this forever and we put ourselves in the comfort of the world that we have today, and don't get me wrong, I'm thankful we have it, without the dangers, adventures, excitement, the challenges, it turns merely being late for your flight to cause anxiety. The simplest things. And therefore, we actually have to push ourselves in this comfortable world to expand that emotional scale that he was talking about, because everything's so easy. So if we can easily get anxiety merely being late for a flight versus a few hundred years ago, another tribe coming to murder, rape, and pillage your community, it gives us that lens, you could say, of, well, we used to live in our emotional scale was here, and these things are 1s and 2s, and now we're making them 9s because we're not seeking danger, we're not seeking adventure, we're not seeking hard things, because we lived in this comfortable life for such a short amount of time that biologically we haven't even adapted yet. It's too short of a time. The Oregon Trail was literally less than 150 years ago. It was right around the fucking corner. So just think of how many generations that was for anyone in here. Not that long ago, people weren't driving fucking cars. People were literally killing each other just to go and find new land. And my point is, when we realize that we must still, as men, push ourselves to do uncomfortable things, hard things, whether it's cold shower, whether it's trying to squat 500 pounds, whether it's trying to seek out adventure and danger in the mountains. Hey, can you grab a hunting tag and survive for 2 weeks out there? Kill yourself a fucking deer and eat it all week? Like, what do we actually do to challenge ourselves that actually allows that anxiety and emotional scale to greatly expand? Because how many of us think, if we think of the things that we allowed to get to ourselves, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Or does 10 grand to easily fix it? Because that's a very incremental amount of money. But we get stressed over all these little things that at the end of the day probably don't matter. So one of the things we all got to do is figure out how do we redirect our energy. How are we building our skills, training hard, reading daily, and ask ourselves, does this frustration serve us? When anger arises, breathe deep, move, pray, pause, think about it. And then we have to lead by example. Your wife, our sons, our brothers, they take cues from us. Many of you, I say this often, you will statistically have, your children will have the same marriage you do. You statistically have the same marriage your parents do. Now you might say, I'm nothing like my dad. It's like, okay, well, you might have your emotions from your mom. Now it's in a body that's 6'1" and full of testosterone. So statistically, it's still the same marriage. It doesn't mean you're going to mirror your father or you're going to mirror your mother, but you're mirroring one of them. And the fact if you're mirroring your mom because you had a passive, father, and she had no emotional stability because she was playing on the more masculine role, and so you act out like she does, but you're full of testosterone, it's even more dangerous. If your father was just full of rage and aggressive and yelled, and you're like, I want to be the opposite. I'm going to be like my mom, passive, quiet. The nice guy gets nowhere either. The passive man can't lead a home either. We have to remember that we can reprogram ourselves. We can make conscious decisions to not continue on the marriage that our parents had, and we can be the example for our children to truly understand what it looks like to be a good man, to love a woman respectfully. And everybody on this call, just the fact that anyone's on this call means that you're willing to take those steps forward, which is awesome. Because pride really gets in the way of men making positive changes. And if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, or just wants to BS for 4 minutes, we can. I can hang out as long as anyone needs to chat. But yeah, it's been a solid call today, guys. Well, yeah, and what does it actually mean to be disrespected? You're valuing that person's opinion more than you value yourself. Like, in what scenario does this person hold so much weight and value that you feel that they're disrespecting you? I've never heard of hyper successful people caring about the opinions of others. You just ignore it. What does it really mean? Unless you're not whole as a person or you value that person's opinion more than your own. Because they ain't going to pay your bills. They're not going to accomplish your goals. They're not creating the great marriage. They're not raising your children for you. Anyone else have a valid reason why we feel disrespected? Yeah, and if you want, Caleb, you can put any questions or stuff in the chat of the Skool community. Put them in there. We'll answer them. And then if you can make that Wednesday call a couple minutes early, maybe we can answer them then.